Um, Hi, my name is Talia BarNoy. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm going to teach you how to make latkes today. This latke recipe is coming from this little book that I've collected a bunch of recipes in. Um, they're a mixture of ones I've made up when I was 5 years old, I think, 7 years old, something like that. And ones that I've collected over time, either from the internet or, in this case, from my mom. And this latke recipe is actually one that my mom brought to our family. She grew up in New York. I'm also from New York. Welcome to New York. And she grew up with a mom who learned how to cook in France. And so my mom did not grow up with any Jewish food whatsoever. She grew up with artichokes and vinegar, but not latkes. She grew up with beef bourguignon and not brisket. And so as she got older, decided to connect more to her Jewish culture and found recipes. And my mom loves cooking, and she's been making recipes up since she was 15, cooking for herself. And so over time, she's figured out and adjusted various recipes. And so this latke recipe is more or less hers because she has worked with it for so many years that she's adapted it and made it her own. And you can make latkes however you want. I've heard that sometimes people take mashed potatoes and then fry them. I personally think this recipe has the right texture. It feels more like potatoes together rather than a hash brown. And so it carries for me, well, it has the right texture to carry whatever topping you put on it. We're going to use applesauce today that I made earlier. But my mom wanted you all to know that she has discovered cranberry sauce with latkes and that they're good. But her cranberry sauce is also special. So I didn't want to push that upon you just because I know she's specifically talking about her sauce, which I'd be happy to send to whoever would like it. But yeah, so I'm going to get you started with my mom's version of a latke recipe. So getting started, we have our ingredients. We've got 4 Idaho potatoes, 2 small onions, 2 eggs, which are in the fridge right now because they're not going to come out yet, 1/4 cup of flour, half a teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of salt, and you're going to need corn or canola oil for the frying later on. And I'm just going to say you should prep at least 2 pans. I am in my new apartment, so I only have these 2 pans. And the reason you should prep 2 pans is because it allows for the cooking time to be faster so that you actually get hot latkes once you're ready to sit down and eat. This recipe is usually good for 4 people. And so you can double it, you can make it less, however much you want. I personally would not have latkes the second day, but that is a personal choice, and you can save it for later if that is what you wish to do. Yeah, so let's get started. So I'm starting to peel the potatoes, and while I'm peeling, I'm going to share a little bit of like a cooking story of how my grandmother learned to cook. It's a little bit of a roundabout story, starting off with my grandparents eloping together. One was a Litvak Jew and the other one wasn't, and once upon a time that meant something. It essentially means one is Lithuanian and one wasn't, and that was a big no-no. And my great-grandparents were so upset that they got married, so that when they'd moved to France, and they would end up living there for 2 years, my grandfather being an artist, wanting to join the art world in Paris, and my grandmother being an actress, and working in the American embassy in France during the communist period, almost getting taken in by communists as well, as a communist as well. She didn't. She also, I don't think, really identified as such either. I think it was just the scare around her. But there's a story in which after they eloped, my great-grandmother would call my grandmother and it would be silent on the phone. And that's how my grandmother knew that her mother was talking to her and was there. And she'd pick up the phone, there'd be silence, and she said, "Oh, hello, mother," and start talking until she heard the phone hang up. And that was for after they had left. So that's the setting of France in which my grandmother is going to learn how to cook. And she's living in her apartment and she's trying to cook these artichokes. She's never seen an artichoke before, really. And she's just cooking them, and it just, the leaves aren't softening. She's just continuing to boil them. And she's not supposed to have a hot plate in this apartment. And so she's a little bit also like, I'm going to cook them and I can't let anyone know that I have this here. And she hears a knock on the door. She goes, and it's the landlady. And she comes up and says, "What are you doing to those artichokes? You are overboiling them." And my grandmother said, "Well, you're supposed to have the leaves go soft. They're not going soft." And she's like, "No, that's not how you cook an artichoke." And that is the start of my grandmother learning how to cook, is having an illegal hot plate and a landlady who did not care enough to do anything about it because she was overcooking the artichokes. And from there, my grandmother became a fantastic cook. She would cook Passover with my mom, but it was never Jewish food. I think they made pork for on Yom Kippur ones. They just did not care. But as my mom grew older, she started caring. She brought my grandmother to synagogue, and they started exploring their Jewish heritage together. And it really is how my culture, my involvement in American Judaism was built up, was just because of a want for more food, Jewish food and Jewish culture. And so that is why I'm peeling potatoes for you today. It's because of an angry French woman for miscooking artichokes. Yeah. So now that you have your potatoes peeled and your onions cut, you're also going to want to chop them in half to make this easier. And you can use a grater, but this is horrifying to consider doing for all of this. So we're going to use a KitchenAid, which has with the grater attachment. And we're going to use the top parts right here in order to grate everything and put it in here. And then that will also mix together the onion and the potato in a much easier way. And then we'll add all the other stuff later. Yes. For KitchenAid, you're going to want to have the desired size. It really doesn't matter what type it is. You just need to make sure that will make it stringy. Think of it like you're grating Parmesan. Or not Parmesan, because that goes fine. Think of it like you're grating cheese and you want it to be in long strings. That's what you want your potatoes to have. And so whichever setting you want is fine as long as it goes into long strings. And so you're going to want to have the setup view there, and then take out these parts. And I think I'm going to need to cut my potato smaller, but essentially you put it in and it will turn on that way. Take the potato, put it in. I'm gonna want to do this, and I'm putting it on low just so I can be more in charge of what's going on. And you're gonna get a little bit of the edge of it to still like not want to grate. That's okay. It also, I think, depends on the size of the machine you have. I had to cut mine in half to fit it into this port. But you can this one still has a little bit more, so you can keep going with this one. But I have an example of one I tried out. This you can hand cut and just add into the mixture on its own. So I'm going to keep doing that, and so should you. And I will be adding the onion in later. Okay, so now we've got our onions, and we do about the same thing. This KitchenAid didn't fit all of my things, but if you have a big enough KitchenAid, it is best to have it all mixed together. As you can see, I've also already cut up the scraps and mixed them in with the thinner ones. It'll be fine with this. It generally is better to have thin mostly, but I'm the type that doesn't like to waste, and if you are too, it's okay to just cut it up thinly and add it in. And they the thick ones kind of look like French fries. Don't eat them until they're fried. But yeah. That did not go. So next you're going to want to get your flour, your baking powder, and your sea salt, and your eggs. And you're going to take your lovely now mixed bowl of potatoes and onions and mix it all together. So I'm going to start doing that. And I'm going to start. Let's crack this. Where did the crack go? Actually, I'm gonna go for a different utensil for the eggs. Are you time-lapsing or?
No, just video.
Okay, so that's good. I was gonna say, the eggs act as a binding agent so that when you are frying them, they stay together. So do not forget the eggs. Okay. And then it's 1/4 cup flour. 1/4.
You don't often think about the smallest ingredients having the biggest impact.
Yeah.
When I went to bake a cake once, I had to ask somebody, how important is that baking powder?
Oh, it's
very,
so
very
important.
Yes. Eggs are very important.
I was watching the Great British Baking Show yesterday with my mom, and there's a British recipe that you need 1/2 teaspoon baking powder. There's a British recipe that they were making called parkin, and it usually has egg as a rising agent. And I think that's what they were saying. And this was a vegan recipe, and it was the technical. So one of the people kept forgetting if she put baking powder in or not. And that was the only rising agent. And so it was thick, flat, and rubbery. She did not get out because she made everything else good. But that's so funny to just like thinking about the smallest ingredient.
Such a big impact.
Yeah. And then I need 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Why are you struggling with Salt is one of those things that if you like do it over and then you spill some, it's fine.
Yeah.
Baking powder is not.
No. Baking powder is precise.
Yes. Like, I'm probably gonna do this and then not put it all the way as I might have because of how haphazardly this is. There we go. Salt is done. Baking powder is done. Done. Move this aside. And then I'm gonna mix my mixture together. And if you wanna come see what that looks like, we've got this lovely, yum, yum, delicious, definitely don't eat because of raw egg, mixture. And my goal right now is to make sure that you can't see the flour in the baking powder, so that I know that's how it's been incorporated. And then once I do this, once I feel like it's incorporated, next up is the frying. And then the most important part of cooking, which is the eating. So that's all mixed up. I'm going to close this. And you've got your 2 pans prepped, and you've got your canola or corn oil. I'm using canola oil. You're going to want to put in canola oil about 1/8 inch deep, and then set the temperature on high for about 2 to 3 minutes. And then you're going to start plopping in, and we'll show you how to do that in a moment. The pan needs to be down. Hopefully you have enough canola oil. I think I do. It'll be fine. Okay, my canola is oiling, and I'm going to give it a little bit more and explain why I need so much oil. And the reason is, and the reason we have as a, in Jewish culture for celebrating Hanukkah, such oily food, is because of the story of Hanukkah. And I'm Ashkenazi, which means that my ancestors settled in the region of the Pale of Settlement, or Ashkenaz, and so have various foods that are based on that region. So latkes are food that is based in that region because it's potato heavy, onion heavy, Eastern European food. And then jelly donuts are also part of that region. And if you talk to my dad, he does not think jelly donuts from this country are jelly donuts. He very much is just like, yeah, no, he will not enjoy the donuts here. He'll eat them for the holiday and then just be like, not the same. But the reason we have such oiled foods is, and I believe there's, I'm not familiar with other oiled foods, but there's various other oiled foods for Sephardic culture, for the various different cultures that make up the Mizrahi population, and Sephardic being the culture of the Jewish people who were kicked out of Spain in 1492 during and after the Inquisition, and the Mizrahi culture being a generalized term for multiple cultures that come out of the East, and not just the Swana region, the Southwest Asia, North Africa region, also including the a little bit further east, the Jewish cultures in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in India, and so those are included within Mizrahi. It's a generalizing term, but it is the 3 terms that we use. But the story of Hanukkah is that in about 500 something BCE, the Seleucid Empire was invading the kingdom of Judea. And the kingdom of Judea was at the time a majority Judean population, later known as the Jewish people. And the Seleucid Empire within the story is called the Greeks, but it is not ancient Greece that they are speaking of, and it's known as that within the story, that we're not talking about the ancient Greeks of the Athenians and the Corinthians and the Spartans, but it's the Seleucid Empire, which is an offshoot of a Greek culture. And they're invading, they're trying to take over, they're trying to establish their rule. And this has been a thing that has been happening for a while now. And I'm realizing I gave you the wrong date. So for what time period it is, I believe 500 something BCE was the destruction of the first temple by Nebuchadnezzar. Either way, it's an example of multiple times people have wanted that landmass specifically for its access to Egypt. And so this is another story of people coming in saying great access to Egypt, Egypt being the location that was considered the breadbasket in ancient Rome. And so it's a great resource-filled area, and everyone wanted to have it. And so the kingdom of Judea landed right in a good pathway to get to Egypt. And so as part of getting this, and this is known for Nebuchadnezzar, I'm making inferences for the story of Hanukkah, the Seleucid Empire is trying to establish their rule. They're trying to say, you got to be like us now. You got to do Greek culture, you got to do Greek things. But within Judean culture, later Jewish culture, it is very inherently known that there is one God and there is only one way of doing things. And their God was not the Judean God. And they didn't like that. And so they rose up, they fought back. And a group known as the Maccabees, which eventually would follow Judah the Maccabee, and rose up, fought back, fought hard. And during that fight, they went into the temple. They locked themselves in. They realized that they needed light. And the only way to light the menorahs, the great menorahs that were made by Moses, in order to, by God's will, that Moses make them in the shape of almond flowers, only because of that was their only way to have light, and they only had one jar of oil left, and they were so sure that it would run out. But then they kept on finding that it replenished. And menorahs traditionally are not candle-based. They have little cups on them with oil in which you put a wick in and light it, and that's what the oil is, the thing that's burning. My grandfather had a menorah like this. And so that's how my dad grew up with it. I grew up with it with candles. And so they kept on refilling these oil lamps and refilling them. And the one jar just did not empty for the next 8 days. And by the end of the 8 days, they were able to leave and return, and then would eventually start the Hasmonean Empire, which was, well, not empire, sorry, Hasmonean kingdom period in the kingdom of Judea, which allowed for a growth in trade and a growth in trade with various empires, and eventually would lead to the Roman Empire puppeting that kingdom for their amazing trade in date palms and date fruits. And so that is why, a long story short, that's why we gotta have oily food. So I'm gonna grab my mixture now that I know for sure my oil is hot and ready. I'm gonna take a little globule. It does not matter how big it is, really. And I'm gonna fry. And we're gonna be, and there needs to be, you need to flatten it with the back of a spoon, which I'm gonna do in just now, because you wanna have them flat. So I'm gonna keep doing this, and you should do it too. And we'll see you again for when it's time to eat.
How long do we leave them in?
Until they are nice and browned on both sides. So you're gonna wanna flip them over. Like, I think I took the wrong tool with me, so bear with me as I go. Okay, so as you can see, it's starting to brown. I'm gonna flip this one over, and look at that. There it is. And the reason you want 2 pans is because, as you can see, they really don't, like, the pans don't fit much. So you're really going to want to go for multiple pans in order to make sure that you do have them hot and ready. And I realized I should have prepped this earlier. But you're going to want to take a plate. You're going to want to get a paper towel, put the paper towel down, and that is what you're going to put your latkes on. And I'm going to have to go find paper towels now.
And see how many 4 potatoes makes.
4 potatoes, 2 small onions. Enough for 4 people and maybe a little more. And we still have like 2 globs left in my bowl. So I'll finish that up. And we can eat. I don't know if there's room on this plate. And now we're done with our latkes. And now that we have applesauce, we have latkes, and the soft sizzling of the pan cooling down, we can eat.
Yay.
Yay.
Thank you, Talia.
Thank you all for having me, for watching, for understanding my version of latkes, which I will hold for myself above all the rest. And that's my own personal opinion, and I will take it with me to the grave.
All right.
Okay.
Can't wait to eat it.
Yeah.